The dust-covered stagecoach rattled to a stop on Timber Creek's Main Street, drawing curious glances from the townspeople who rarely saw new arrivals in this remote corner of Arizona territory. The year was 1885, and the blistering August heat shimmered off the weathered boardwalks as Penelope "Penny" Winters stepped down from the coach, her face etched with exhaustion and determination. Behind her, 4 children with matching copper hair and hollow cheeks peered out with wary eyes. Their bare feet touched the scorching dirt as they huddled close to their mother's threadbare skirts. Flynn MacAllister, leaning against the post outside his general store, straightened up at the sight. In his 10 years in Timber Creek, he'd seen desperate folk pass through, but something about this woman and her children struck him differently. Her chin was held high despite the dust coating her face and the visible holes in her black mourning dress. The children, 2 boys and 2 girls ranging from about 4 to 10 years old, clung to her like sailors to a life raft in a storm. "Ma, I'm thirsty," the smallest girl whimpered, her voice carrying on the still afternoon air. "Hush now, Abigail," Penny whispered, stroking the child's tangled hair. "We'll find water soon." Flynn watched as she gathered what appeared to be their only possessions, a worn carpetbag and a small wooden box tied with twine. The stagecoach driver tossed down a battered trunk before climbing back to his seat. "Good luck to you, madam," the driver called, tipping his hat before snapping the reins and continuing down the street toward the livery. Flynn's gaze dropped to their bare feet, reddened and blistered from what must have been a long journey. Without thinking, he pushed away from the post and approached them. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. "Welcome to Timber Creek. Can I help you with your belongings?" Penny turned, startled by his voice. Up close, Flynn could see her eyes were a striking green, though rimmed with fatigue. She couldn't have been more than 25. "That's very kind, sir, but we'll manage," she replied, her voice soft but firm. Flynn noticed how she shifted her weight to stand between him and her children. A protective mother, he thought. Name's Flynn MacAllister. "I own the general store just there," he said, pointing to the 2-story building with MacAllister's General Mercantile painted across the front. "Been a dry spell around here. Might I offer you and your little one some water?" The oldest boy, perhaps 10 years old, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Ma, please." Flynn saw her resistance crumble under the pleading looks of her children. "Very well, thank you, Mr. MacAllister. Just Flynn, madam," he said, bending to pick up the trunk. It was surprisingly light. "And you are Penelope Winters." "These are my children, Samuel, Joseph, Martha, and Abigail." Each child nodded solemnly when named, eyes fixed on Flynn's boots as if they'd never seen such a thing. Flynn led them to his store, aware of the whispers that followed. Timber Creek was a small town of about 400 souls, and newcomers were rare, especially a widow with 4 children and no shoes to their name. Inside the store, cooled by thick adobe walls, Flynn poured water from a pitcher into 5 tin cups. The children drank greedily while their mother sipped slowly, her eyes surveying the shelves stocked with dry goods, tools, fabric, and other necessities. "What brings you to Timber Creek, Mrs. Winters?" Flynn asked, leaning against the counter. "A fresh start," she answered simply. "My husband's brother wrote that there might be work here." "Your husband's brother, who might that be?" "Walter Winters. He mentioned in his letter that he's been working at a ranch outside of town." Flynn frowned. "Walter Winters. Can't say I know the name, but then the big spreads higher hands seasonally. Where are you planning to stay?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "Walter said he'd meet us, but he doesn't appear to be here. Perhaps there's a boarding house." "Mrs. Holloway runs a decent place down the street, but she charges $1 a night per room," Flynn replied, noting how Penny's shoulders slumped slightly at the mention of cost. "I see," she murmured. "Well, we'll manage something. Thank you for the water, Mr. MacAllister." As she gathered the children, Flynn's eyes once again fell to their bare feet. Without another thought, he walked to a shelf and returned with 5 pairs of sturdy boots. "Might I suggest these before you go any further? The ground gets mighty hot this time of year." Penny stiffened. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly consider it a welcome gift," Flynn interrupted. Can't have folks thinking Timber Creek doesn't look after its visitors. The oldest boy, Samuel, looked up at his mother with hope in his eyes. Flynn could see her pride warring with practicality as she stared at the boots. "Let me help you find the right sizes," Flynn said, kneeling to measure the smallest girl's foot against a boot. "Miss Abigail, I reckon you're about a size 2. The child giggled as he tickled her soul, the first real smile he'd seen from any of them. One by one, he fitted boots to each child, noting how carefully they held them as if they might vanish. When he offered Penny a pair, she hesitated longer. "Mr. MacAllister, your kindness is overwhelming, but I cannot accept charity without knowing how I'll repay it." Flynn met her gaze steadily. "Mrs. Winters, out here, neighbors help neighbors. That's how we survive. You can settle up when you're able." Something in his tone must have convinced her, for she finally nodded and accepted the boots. As they all sat trying on their new footwear, the bell above the door jangled. Sheriff Marcus Bailey entered, his weathered face curious beneath his hat. "Afternoon, Flynn. Heard we had newcomers." Flynn introduced Penny and her children, explaining briefly about Walter Winters. The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Walter Winters, you say? Only Walter I know of worked at the Circle T Ranch last spring, but he moved on months ago, said something about heading to California." Penny's face paled. "Are you certain? He wrote to us in Pennsylvania just 2 months ago saying we should join him here." "Letters take time, madam," the sheriff said kindly, "but I can ask around. Where will you be staying?" When Penny remained silent, Flynn stepped in. "Mrs. Winters and her children can use the rooms above my store until we locate her brother-in-law. I was about to show them up." The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Welcome to Timber Creek, Mrs. Winters. Flynn here is good people. You're in capable hands." After the sheriff left, Penny turned to Flynn with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Mr. MacAllister, I cannot impose, it's no imposition," Flynn assured her. "The rooms have been empty since my sister moved to Tucson last year. Besides, it's just temporary until we find your brother-in-law." Though Flynn didn't voice his doubts, something told him Walter Winters had no intention of being found. The look in Penny's eyes suggested she harbored the same fear. "Children, thank Mr. MacAllister," she instructed softly. A chorus of "thank you, sir" followed as the children admired their new boots. Flynn smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "Now, let's get you settled upstairs, and then perhaps we can discuss what brought you all this way." As he led them to the back staircase, Flynn couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had brought Penny Winters and her 4 shoeless children to his doorstep, and why the thought of them leaving already troubled him so. Upstairs, Flynn showed Penny and her children to the modest accommodations. The main room contained a small stove, a table with 4 chairs, and a worn sofa. 2 doorways led to bedrooms, one larger, one smaller. "It's not fancy," Flynn said, suddenly aware of the faded curtains and simple furnishings, "but it's clean and dry." Penny stood in the center of the room, her new boots making soft, creaking sounds on the wooden floor. "It's perfect, Mr. MacAllister, far better than what we've been accustomed to these past months." The children had already begun exploring, their earlier wariness giving way to cautious excitement. "Ma, there's a real bed," Martha called from one doorway. "And a washstand with a mirror," Samuel added from the other room. Flynn watched as Penny's composure wavered slightly, her eyes growing bright with unshed tears. She quickly blinked them away. "There's a pump in the back alley for water," Flynn explained. "Privy's out there too. I keep a pot of coffee going downstairs most days, and you're welcome to help yourself." "You're very generous, Mr. MacAllister, but I must find work immediately. I cannot accept charity indefinitely." Her voice was soft but determined. Flynn nodded, respecting her pride. "Town's growing, might be opportunities. What skills do you have, if you don't mind my asking?" "I was a school teacher before I married," she replied. "I can sew, cook, keep accounts. Whatever is necessary to provide for my children." "We haven't had a proper teacher since Miss Henderson left last spring," Flynn mused. "School's been closed, but the town council's been looking. I'm on the council. I could put in a word." Hope flickered across her face. That would be wonderful." In the meantime, Flynn continued, I could use help in the store. Stock needs organizing, shelves need dusting, and my account books are a mess. Mr. MacAllister, Flynn, he corrected gently. Flynn, she amended with a small smile. I appreciate the offer, but I wouldn't want anyone to think. To think what? That there are improper arrangements, she finished, a blush coloring her cheeks. Flynn understood immediately. A young widow living above a bachelor's store would certainly set tongues wagging. Mrs. Winters, this is a small town, but folks here generally mind their business. Still, if it concerns you, my neighbor Mrs. Larson is a respectable widow who often helps in the store. Her presence should satisfy propriety. Penny seemed to consider this, then nodded. Very well. I accept your offer of employment, but I insist the cost of our lodging and the boots be deducted from my wages. We'll work something out, Flynn agreed, admiring her determination. Now, you all must be hungry. The cafe across the street serves a decent meal. We have some provisions, Penny said quickly, gesturing to her carpet bag. Flynn understood, pride again. Tell you what, I'll bring up some supplies from the store. Consider it an advance on your wages. You can cook here, get settled in properly. Before she could object, he headed downstairs, gathering flour, salt, sugar, coffee, beans, bacon, potatoes, and some apples. He added a small bag of hard candies as an afterthought, remembering how rarely he'd had sweets as a child. When he returned upstairs, the children had unpacked their meager belongings. Abigail was carefully arranging 4 worn rag dolls on the sofa, while Martha helped her mother shake out a faded quilt. The boys were carrying water from the pump in a bucket they'd found. Some essentials to get you started, Flynn said, placing the goods on the table. Penny's eyes widened at the abundance. This is far too much. Essentials, Flynn repeated firmly. I'll leave you to get settled. Store opens at 7 tomorrow if you're still inclined to help. We'll be there, Penny promised. Thank you, Flynn. Your kindness won't be forgotten. As he descended the stairs, Flynn couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. 10 years he'd been in Timber Creek, building his business, becoming a respected member of the community. Yet in all that time, he'd never felt the strange tug in his chest that he'd experienced when he saw Penny Winters and her 4 barefoot children step down from that stagecoach. The next morning, Flynn arrived at the store earlier than usual. He swept the porch, arranged the display of tools near the door, and put on a fresh pot of coffee. By 6:45, he heard footsteps on the back stairs. Penny appeared first, her copper hair neatly braided and pinned, wearing the same black dress but now meticulously brushed free of dust. Behind her came the children, all wearing their new boots, faces scrubbed clean, hair combed. Good morning, Penny said, her voice stronger than the previous day. We're ready to work, Flynn smiled. I see that. Good morning to you all. Children, there are brooms in that corner if you'd like to help sweep. Mrs. Winters, I thought you might help me with these invoices. The morning passed in industrious harmony. The children proved eager workers, with Samuel and Joseph helping to stack canned goods while Martha dusted shelves. Little Abigail appointed herself greeter, solemnly welcoming each customer with a curtsy that brought smiles to even the most taciturn ranchers. Penny, as Flynn had suspected, was quick with numbers and soon brought order to his chaotic accounting system. By midday, the store looked better than it had in months, and Flynn's ledgers were neatly reconciled. You've done wonders already, Flynn told Penny as they paused for a midday meal of bread and cheese. I'm thinking the town council will be mighty interested in your teaching credentials. Do you really think so? Penny asked, a note of vulnerability in her voice. Teaching again would mean so much to me. Council meets tomorrow evening. I'll speak with them then, Flynn promised. In the meantime, a woman came in asking about sewing work while you were in the storeroom. Seems Mrs. Baker's daughter is getting married next month, and they need help with the bride's dress and some other garments. Penny's eyes lit up. I would be delighted to help. I'm quite skilled with a needle. I figured as much, seeing those neat patches on the children's clothes. I told her you might call on her this afternoon if you're agreeable. Yes, of course. Penny turned to her children. You'll need to behave while I'm gone. They can stay here, Flynn offered. Samuel and Joseph seem to have a knack for organizing inventory, and the girls are natural salespeople. Penny hesitated, her protective instinct evident, but the hopeful looks on her children's faces won out. Very well, but mind Mr. MacAllister's instructions. That afternoon, as Penny visited Mrs. Baker, Flynn found himself enjoying the children's company. Samuel, serious and thoughtful at 10, reminded Flynn of himself at that age. Joseph, 8 and full of questions, wanted to know everything about running a store. Martha, 6, had a gift for arithmetic that surprised him, while 4-year-old Abigail charmed every customer with her earnest offers of assistance. By closing time, when Penny returned with the news that Mrs. Baker had commissioned several garments, Flynn felt as though the Winters family had always been part of his life. The children behaved, Penny asked as they locked up the store. Like angels, Flynn assured her, though he winked at the children. Though I suspect they're capable of mischief when properly motivated. This earned him sheepish grins from all four. Mrs. Baker was most generous, Penny said. She's advanced me enough to purchase fabric, and I wondered if I might buy some from your store, of course. Choose whatever you need in the morning, Flynn replied. And now I believe I promised to inquire about your brother-in-law. Penny's smile faded. Yes, though I'm beginning to think the sheriff was right about Walter moving on. Still, we should try. Tell me more about him. When did you last see him? As they climbed the stairs to her lodgings, Penny explained that Walter had visited them in Pennsylvania after her husband Frederick's death from pneumonia the previous winter. Walter stayed only 2 days. He said he was establishing himself out west and would send for us when he was settled. The letter came in June with just enough money for the stagecoach tickets. Flynn frowned. And nothing since then, no meeting place arranged, just that he worked at a ranch near Timber Creek, Penny sighed. I realize now how foolish I was to come all this way on such vague information, but our situation in Pennsylvania had become difficult. The shadow that crossed her face suggested more than simple financial hardship, but Flynn didn't press. They'd reached the door to her rooms. I'll ask at the Circle T tomorrow, Flynn promised. Even if Walter has moved on, perhaps someone knows where. Thank you, Penny said softly, for everything. As Flynn descended the stairs, he couldn't help but wonder what had really driven Penny Winters to travel halfway across the country with 4 young children and almost no possessions. Whatever it was, he found himself increasingly determined to help her build the new life she so clearly sought. Over the next 2 weeks, a rhythm developed. Penny worked in the store mornings, sewed for Mrs. Baker and other clients afternoons, and cared for her children evenings. The children divided their time between helping in the store and playing with the local children, who had initially been curious about the newcomers but quickly accepted them. Flynn's inquiries about Walter Winters yielded little. The foreman at Circle T confirmed Walter had worked there briefly but left owing money to several men. No one knew his destination, though rumors suggested he might have joined a cattle drive to Kansas. When Flynn gently shared this news with Penny one evening as they sat on the store's back porch watching the children play in the fading light, she merely nodded. I suspected as much, she admitted. Walter was never reliable, even when Frederick was alive. I think he only visited us after the funeral because he thought Frederick might have left something of value. I'm sorry, Flynn said, noting the resignation in her voice. Don't be, Penny replied, meeting his gaze with surprising steadiness. In a way, Walter did us a favor. We couldn't have stayed in Pennsylvania much longer, and at least here we've found kindness and opportunity. Flynn wanted to ask what had happened in Pennsylvania, but sensed she wasn't ready to share that story. Instead, he changed the subject to the town council meeting scheduled for that evening. I've spoken with the other council members about the teaching position, he said. They're eager to meet you. If you're agreeable, I thought you might attend tonight's meeting. Penny's eyes widened. Tonight, but I'm not prepared. I have nothing suitable to wear. You look fine, Flynn assured her, though in truth, he'd noticed how she carefully washed and pressed her single black dress each night. It's your qualifications they're interested in, not your wardrobe. Still, he could see her uncertainty. An idea struck him. "Wait here," he said, rising and entering the store. He returned moments later with a package wrapped in brown paper. "I took the liberty," he explained, handing it to her. "Mrs. Larson helped me with the sizing." Penny unwrapped the package to find a simple but elegant navy blue dress, appropriate for a schoolteacher and far more practical than morning black in the Arizona heat. "Flynn, I couldn't possibly consider it a business investment," he interrupted with a smile. "Timber Creek needs a teacher and you need a position. This just improves your chances." "I'll repay you," she insisted, though her fingers caressed the fabric with obvious longing. "I have no doubt," Flynn replied. "The meeting's at 8 in the town hall." "I'll watch the children so you can prepare." That evening, when Penny descended the stairs in her new dress, her hair arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual simple braid, Flynn momentarily lost the ability to speak. The navy blue complemented her fair complexion and brought out the green of her eyes. With her head held high and a small leather portfolio in her hands containing her teaching credentials, he presumed she looked every inch the respectable schoolteacher. "Will I do?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "More than do," Flynn managed. "The council would be fools not to hire you on the spot." A blush colored her cheeks at his praise. "The children are already in bed. Abigail wanted you to know she said her prayers for me to become the teacher." "Smart girl," Flynn said with a smile. "Shall we go?" The town council meeting went exactly as Flynn had hoped. Despite some initial skepticism from Harold Jenkins, the banker who questioned whether a mother of 4 could devote sufficient attention to teaching, Penny impressed everyone with her knowledge, experience, and quiet dignity. When she produced letters of recommendation from her previous position at her respected school in Philadelphia, even Jenkins was silenced. By meeting's end, Penny had been officially offered the position of teacher for Timber Creek, with classes to begin in 3 weeks' time once the schoolhouse had been properly cleaned and prepared. "Congratulations, Mrs. Winters," Mayor Collins said, shaking her hand. "The children of this town have gone without proper schooling too long. We're fortunate you've come to us." "Thank you, Mayor Collins. I promise I won't disappoint you," Penny replied, her voice steady though Flynn could see the emotion she was containing. As they walked back to the store under a canopy of stars, Penny finally let her composure slip. Tears of joy and relief spilled down her cheeks. "I never thought, after everything that happened, to be a teacher again," she managed between breaths. Flynn resisted the urge to put his arm around her shoulders. Instead, he offered his handkerchief. "You earned this, Penny. The council saw what I saw from the beginning, a capable, intelligent woman who doesn't back down from challenges." She dabbed at her eyes, composing herself. "The salary is more generous than I expected. We can finally move to proper lodgings. I'll start looking tomorrow." Flynn felt an unexpected pang at the thought of the Winters family leaving his store. "There's no rush," he said quickly. "The rooms above the store are yours for as long as you need them." "You've already done so much for us," Penny replied softly. "Too much." "Nonsense," Flynn countered. "You've done as much for me." The stores never run better. Customers comment daily on how welcome the children make them feel, and truth be told, I've enjoyed the company. They had reached the store. Moonlight silvered Penny's copper hair as she turned to face him. "You're a good man, Flynn MacAllister," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how we would have survived without your kindness." Before he could respond, she rose on tiptoe and kissed his cheek, then quickly disappeared up the stairs, leaving Flynn standing in the silver moonlight, his hand touching the spot where her lips had been. The next morning, Flynn woke to the sound of excited children's voices above his own quarters at the back of the store. The Winters children were clearly celebrating their mother's new position. Flynn smiled, recalling the warmth of Penny's impulsive kiss. He'd lain awake half the night thinking about it, and about the woman who was rapidly becoming more than just a friend in need. When he entered the store, he found Samuel and Joseph already sweeping the porch, while Martha carefully arranged penny candy in the glass jars that lined one counter. Abigail sat on the counter itself, swinging her booted feet and chattering to Martha about how their mother was going to teach everyone in town. "Good morning," Flynn greeted them. "I see the good news has spread. Ma's going to teach school again." Abigail announced as though Flynn might not have heard, "And we get to go too." "That's wonderful," Flynn agreed, helping the little girl down from the counter. "Where is your mother?" "Upstairs, sewing," Martha answered. "She said the new teacher needs more than one dress." Flynn nodded, pleased that Penny was using some of her earnings for herself. From what he'd observed, she rarely spent anything that wasn't directly for the children's needs. The bell above the door jangled and Sheriff Bailey entered, his expression serious. "Morning, Flynn." "Children," he greeted them. "Might I have a word in private, Flynn?" Something in the sheriff's tone sent a ripple of concern through Flynn. "Of course. Children, mind the store for a moment. Call if any customers need help." Flynn led the sheriff to his small office at the back. "What's wrong, Marcus?" "Got a telegram from the sheriff in Allentown, Pennsylvania," Marcus said, producing a yellow paper from his pocket. "Seems he's been looking for a Mrs. Penelope Winters and her 4 children." Flynn's stomach tightened. "What for?" "Nothing criminal," Marcus assured him quickly. "Apparently there's an inheritance matter. Her husband's family estate has been settled and there's money due to her and the children." Relief flooded Flynn. "That's good news then. I'll tell her when she comes down." Marcus hesitated. "There's more. The Allentown sheriff mentioned she left town rather suddenly after some trouble with her father-in-law. Old man Winters apparently tried to claim custody of the children after his son died, claiming Penny was an unfit mother." Flynn's relief turned to anger. "That's ridiculous. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with those children can see they're well-raised and devoted to their mother." "I agree," Marcus nodded. "But I thought you should know. If old man Winters was willing to try to take her children once, he might try again, especially now there's money involved." Flynn considered this. "Does the telegram say how much the inheritance is?" "No, just that it's substantial. Frederick Winters apparently had investments that paid off after his death." After the sheriff left, Flynn remained in his office, troubled by this new information. It explained why Penny had traveled so far on such flimsy assurances from Walter she'd been fleeing something worse than poverty. The thought of someone trying to separate her from her children made his blood boil. When he finally returned to the store floor, he found Penny there, helping a customer select fabric. She wore her new blue dress, and her face held a serenity he hadn't seen before. Knowing what he now did about her past troubles made her strength all the more remarkable. He waited until the customer left before approaching her. "Could I speak with you privately?" Concern immediately crossed her features. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly," Flynn assured her, leading her to the storeroom where they could speak without the children overhearing. "Sheriff Bailey received a telegram from Pennsylvania about you." Penny paled. "My father-in-law, has he found us?" No, Flynn said quickly, taking her trembling hands in his without thinking. "It's about an inheritance. Your husband's investments have paid out and there's money due to you and the children." She sagged against a shelf in relief. "Thank God, I feared. The sheriff did mention there had been some trouble with your father-in-law trying to claim custody of the children," Flynn continued gently. "Is that why you came west?" Penny nodded, her eyes downcast. "Herbert Winters is a powerful man in Allentown. After Frederick died, he claimed I was unsuitable as a mother because I intended to work as a teacher again. He tried to use his influence with the local judge to have the children placed in his care." "That's outrageous," Flynn said, still holding her hands. "He nearly succeeded," Penny continued, her voice barely audible. "The judge was sympathetic to his arguments that children need a proper home with servants and luxury, not a working mother. When Walter mentioned Arizona, it seemed like Providence. I sold everything we couldn't carry and left before Herbert could stop us." Flynn's grip on her hands tightened reassuringly. "You did what any good mother would do, and now it seems your courage has been rewarded with this inheritance." "The money isn't important," Penny said, finally meeting his gaze. "Our safety and freedom are what matter, do you think?" "Will the telegram reveal our location to Herbert?" Flynn considered this. "I don't know, but Timber Creek is a long way from Pennsylvania and you have friends here now. The whole town council saw your qualifications last night and recognized your worth as a teacher and a mother." A small smile touched her lips. "Thank you for saying that, and for everything else." Flynn suddenly realized he was still holding her hands and gently released them. "You should reply to the telegram, claim what's rightfully yours. The money could secure your future, your children's education." "You're right, of course," Penny agreed. "I'll speak with the sheriff today." As she turned to leave the storeroom, Flynn called after her. "Penny, you don't have to face any of this alone, not anymore." The look of gratitude she gave him warmed him to his core. "I'm beginning to believe that," she said softly before returning to the store floor. That evening, after closing the store, Flynn found himself unable to settle to his usual routine of bookkeeping and reading. Instead, he paced his small quarters, thinking about Penny and her children. The thought of her father-in-law trying to take custody bothered him deeply, as did the possibility that the telegram might somehow alert Herbert Winters to their whereabouts. A soft knock at his back door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Penny standing there, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said. "The children are asleep and I needed to talk." "Come in," Flynn said, stepping aside. His quarters were simple but comfortable, a small sitting area with 2 chairs near the stove, a table for dining, and a doorway leading to his bedroom. "Can I offer you coffee, or perhaps something stronger?" "Coffee would be welcome," Penny replied, taking one of the chairs. "I went to see Sheriff Bailey this afternoon." Flynn busied himself with the coffee pot. "And what did you learn about the inheritance?" "It appears Frederick's investments in a railroad venture paid dividends beyond anyone's expectations. There's a bank draft waiting for me in Allentown, nearly $5,000. Flynn nearly dropped the coffee pot. "5,000, that's a fortune." "It seems impossible," Penny agreed. "We were always comfortable but never wealthy. Frederick must have taken a considerable risk without telling me." "That kind of money would set you and the children up for life," Flynn said, handing her a cup of coffee. "You could buy a house, maybe even start a business of your own if you wanted." "Yes," Penny said, staring into her cup. "It changes everything." Something in her tone made Flynn pause. "Isn't that good news?" "Of course," she replied quickly. "It's just, we've only just begun to feel settled here. The children are happy, I have the teaching position, and now you have options," Flynn finished for her. "Including returning to Pennsylvania if you wished." Penny looked up sharply. "Is that what you think I should do?" Flynn sat in the chair opposite her. "I think you should do whatever brings you and your children happiness and security. If that means staying in Timber Creek, all the better. If it means going elsewhere, then that's what you should do." Though the words nearly choked him. The thought of Penny and the children leaving had become increasingly painful to contemplate. "The sheriff says I'll need to sign papers and prove my identity to claim the money," Penny continued. "He sent a reply telegram, but it will likely take weeks to arrange everything." "So you have time to consider your options," Flynn said. Penny set down her cup and leaned forward slightly. "Flynn, there's something else. The sheriff mentioned that my father-in-law has apparently offered a reward for information about our whereabouts." Flynn's jaw tightened. "A reward, as if you were fugitives?" $500, Penny confirmed. "Sheriff Bailey assured me he has no intention of claiming it, but he warned that others might not be so principled if word spreads." "Marcus is right," Flynn agreed, troubled. "Money like that could tempt folks who don't know the full story." "What should I do?" Penny asked, her voice small. "I can't risk Herbert finding us before I've secured the inheritance. He would use every legal maneuver to claim it on the children's behalf, and then we'd never be free of him." Flynn considered the problem. "First, we keep this quiet. Only the sheriff and I know about the telegram. Second, we proceed with your teaching position as planned. It establishes you as a respected member of the community, which would count in your favor if there were ever legal challenges." "And third," Penny prompted. Flynn met her gaze steadily. "Third, I promise you that as long as I'm breathing, no one will take your children from you. Not Herbert Winters, not anyone." Tears welled in Penny's eyes at his vehemence. "Why? Why would you make such a promise to someone you barely know?" Flynn hadn't planned to speak so forcefully, but now that he had, he couldn't retreat. Because in the short time you've been here, I've seen what an extraordinary mother you are, how you put your children first in everything. How you've rebuilt your life from nothing but determination and hard work. He hesitated, then added more softly, and because I've come to care for all of you more than I thought possible. Penny's breath caught. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she rose, setting her coffee cup on the table. I should check on the children, she said, though her eyes remained fixed on his. Flynn stood as well. Of course. At the door, Penny paused. Thank you, Flynn, for believing in me. It's been a long time since anyone did. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving Flynn with the lingering scent of lavender and the certainty that his life had become inextricably entwined with hers. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Penny divided her time between preparing for the school term, continuing her sewing work, and corresponding with a lawyer in Allentown about the inheritance. The children helped clean and restore the schoolhouse, proud that their mother would be teaching there. Flynn found himself spending more time with the family Sunday picnics by the creek, evenings on the porch reading stories to the children, accompanying Penny to town council meetings. To the people of Timber Creek, they had begun to look like a family, though neither Flynn nor Penny acknowledged the growing feelings between them. The day before school was to begin, Flynn closed the store early and announced he had a surprise for the children. He led the curious Winters family to the schoolhouse, where a new sign hung over the door. Timber Creek School, Mrs. Penelope Winters, teacher. It's beautiful, Penny breathed, touching the painted letters. That's not the only surprise, Flynn grinned, opening the schoolhouse door. Inside, the once dilapidated building had been transformed. New desks lined the room, a polished teacher's desk stood at the front, and bookshelves filled with volumes lined one wall. A large blackboard gleamed with fresh chalk markings. Welcome, students, Flynn, Penny gasped. How did you manage this? Town council approved the funds for the desks and blackboard, Flynn explained. The books are donations from folks around town. Everyone's excited about the school reopening. The children ran from desk to desk, exclaiming over the books and supplies. Abigail climbed into one of the smallest desks and announced, "This one's mine." "Not yet, little miss," Flynn laughed. "You've got a few years before your school age." "But Ma's the teacher," Abigail protested. "I should get to come, and you will," Penny assured her, kneeling beside the desk. "You can be my special helper while your brothers and sister attend lessons." This compromise satisfied Abigail, who immediately began arranging pencils on the desk with great importance. As the children explored, Flynn led Penny to the teacher's desk. "One more thing," he said, opening the drawer to reveal a leather-bound journal, a silver pen and inkwell, and a small brass bell. "Every proper teacher needs the right tools," he explained, enjoying the wonder in Penny's eyes. "Flynn, I don't know what to say," she murmured, touching the items reverently. "Say you'll join us for supper at the hotel dining room tonight," Flynn suggested. "A celebration before your first day of teaching." Penny hesitated. "All of us. The children can be quite lively at meal times." "All of you," Flynn confirmed. "I've already spoken to Mrs. Holbrook at the hotel. She's prepared a private dining room for us." That evening, as they sat around the table in the hotel's best dining room, Flynn couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come in just over a month. Penny wore a new green dress that complemented her eyes, purchased with her own earnings, she'd proudly told him. The children were scrubbed and polished, their table manners impeccable despite their excitement. "A toast," Flynn said, raising his glass of lemonade in deference to the children. "To Mrs. Winters, Timber Creek's finest teacher, and to new beginnings." "To Ma," the children chorused, clinking their glasses carefully. Penny blushed at the attention but raised her glass as well. "And to good friends who make new beginnings possible." Her eyes met Flynn's over the rim of her glass, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had grown beyond friendship, but remained unspoken. The moment was broken by the arrival of Mrs. Holbrook with a special dessert, apple pie with vanilla custard, a rare treat in Timber Creek. As the children exclaimed over the dessert, Penny leaned closer to Flynn. You've thought of everything, she said softly. This evening is perfect, not quite everything, Flynn replied. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Before he could continue, the door to the private dining room burst open. Sheriff Bailey stood there, his expression grim. Flynn, Mrs. Winters, he said, nodding apologetically to the children. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a matter that can't wait. Flynn rose immediately. What's happened? Telegram just arrived from back east, Marcus replied, his eyes shifting to Penny. Herbert Winters has left Pennsylvania. He's on his way to Arizona Territory looking for you and the children. Penny's face drained of color. How did he find out where we are? Doesn't say, Marcus replied. But the telegram mentioned he left Allentown 2 weeks ago. Given travel time, he could arrive any day. Flynn moved to Penny's side instinctively. We'll handle this, Marcus. Thank you for the warning. After the sheriff left, Penny sat frozen, her untouched dessert forgotten. The children, sensing their mother's distress, fell silent. What will he do when he finds us? Samuel asked, his young face serious beyond his years. Penny seemed unable to answer, so Flynn did. Nothing that will harm you, he assured the boy. Your mother and I won't allow it. Is grandfather going to take us away? Martha asked fearfully. No, Flynn said firmly, meeting each child's eyes in turn. No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go, I promise you that. Penny finally found her voice. Children, finish your dessert, then we need to return home and prepare. Prepare for what, Ma? Joseph asked. For whatever comes, she answered, her voice strengthening with resolve. But Flynn is right. We're not going anywhere we don't choose to go. Later, after they'd returned to the store and the children were in bed, Flynn and Penny sat at the small table in her rooms discussing options. The inheritance paperwork is still being processed, Penny said, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. If Herbert arrives before it's complete, he could claim I'm pursuing it fraudulently. Would that claim hold up legally? Flynn asked. I don't know, Penny admitted. Herbert has powerful friends, even here in the territory. He does business with several mining companies. Flynn considered this. What about the teaching position? That establishes you as a respected professional with means to support your family. It helps, Penny agreed. But Herbert could argue it takes me away from my duties as a mother. That's what he tried in Allentown. Flynn reached across the table and took her hand. Penny, there's another option we haven't discussed. She looked up, questioning. Marry me, Flynn said simply. Penny's eyes widened. What? Marry me, he repeated. A widow with 4 children might be vulnerable to legal challenges from her father-in-law. A married woman with a husband to provide for her family would be much less so. Flynn, I can't let you sacrifice yourself like that. It wouldn't be a sacrifice, he interrupted, his voice soft but intense. Penny, these past weeks with you and the children have been the happiest of my life. I've been looking for a way to tell you how I feel, but I didn't want to pressure you when you were just finding your footing. You have feelings for me, Penny whispered. Flynn smiled. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stepped down from that stagecoach with your chin held high despite everything you'd been through. And every day since has only confirmed what I already knew, that you're the bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. Tears filled Penny's eyes. Flynn, I care for you deeply. The children adore you, but marriage, so suddenly. Maybe it seems sudden, Flynn acknowledged. But out here, people recognize what matters quickly. Life's too uncertain to waste time. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not proposing just to protect you from Herbert, though I'd do anything to keep you and the children safe. I'm proposing because I love you and I want to build a life with you, all of you. Penny was silent for a long moment, tears spilling down her cheeks. Finally, she spoke. When Frederick died, I never thought I'd find love again. I was focused solely on protecting the children, on survival. And you've done that magnificently, Flynn assured her. But then we came here and you, she continued, her voice strengthening. You didn't just give us boots and shelter, Flynn, you gave us hope, a future. She turned her hand in his so their fingers intertwined. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Flynn's heart soared. He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. I promise you won't regret it, he whispered before lowering his lips to hers in a tender kiss. When they parted, Penny smiled through her tears. "We should tell the children in the morning, and the Reverend," Flynn added. "I think we should be married as soon as possible before Herbert arrives." Penny nodded, then a thought struck her. "Flynn, what about your store, your life here? Marriage to me means instant fatherhood to 4 children," Flynn chuckled. "I've been practicing for weeks, haven't I? Besides, I've always wanted a family. I just never found the right woman to build one with until now." The next morning, Flynn arrived early with fresh pastries from the hotel bakery. When Penny gathered the children at the breakfast table, they immediately sensed something important was happening. "Children," Penny began, her voice slightly nervous. "Mr. MacAllister and I have something to tell you. Are we moving again?" Samuel asked warily. "No, quite the opposite," Flynn answered. "I've asked your mother to marry me and she's agreed." There was a moment of stunned silence, then an explosion of questions. "Mary, like a wedding," Martha exclaimed. "Does this mean you'll be our pa now?" Joseph asked. "Will we live in your house?" Samuel wanted to know. "Can I be the flower girl?" Abigail demanded, bouncing in her seat. Flynn and Penny exchanged amused glances. "Yes to all," Flynn confirmed, "if that's all right with all of you." The children's enthusiastic approval manifested in a group hug that nearly knocked Flynn off his feet. Later that morning, while the older children helped in the store and Penny prepared for her first day of teaching, Flynn visited Reverend Thomas to arrange the wedding. To his surprise, the Reverend seemed unsurprised by the news. "I've been watching you two," he admitted with a smile. "The way you look at each other, the way you've become a family these past weeks, God's hand is clearly in this union. Can you perform the ceremony tomorrow?" Flynn asked. "There are circumstances that make haste advisable." The Reverend nodded knowingly. Sheriff Bailey mentioned Mrs. Winters' situation. "Rest assured, this community protects its own. Tomorrow evening after school would be perfect." Word of the impending wedding spread through Timber Creek like wildfire. By midday, Mrs. Baker and several other ladies had descended on the store with offers to help prepare for the ceremony. Mrs. Larson insisted on hosting a small reception at her home. The town's only photographer, Mr. Simmons, offered his services as a wedding gift. When Penny returned from her first day of teaching, which by all accounts had been a tremendous success, she was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. "I never expected this," she confessed to Flynn as they sorted through the gifts and offers that had accumulated during the day. "We've only been here such a short time. Timber Creek takes care of its own," Flynn replied, echoing the Reverend's words, "and you became one of us the moment you decided to stay." The wedding was set for 5 o'clock the following evening. Penny would teach a full day, then change at the schoolhouse where Mrs. Baker and Mrs. Larson would help her prepare. The ceremony would take place in the small church, followed by a reception at the Larson home. That night, as Flynn walked Penny and the children upstairs after closing the store, Penny held him back for a moment. "Tomorrow's our wedding day," she said softly. "It hardly seems real." Flynn took her hands in his. "Having second thoughts, not at all," she assured him quickly. "It's just so much has happened so quickly. 6 weeks ago we arrived with nothing but the clothes on our backs, and now you're about to become Mrs. MacAllister, respected schoolteacher and wife of the handsomest store owner in Timber Creek," Flynn teased, drawing a laugh from her. "The only store owner," she corrected, but her eyes shone with happiness. "Get some rest," Flynn advised. "Tomorrow we'll be busy." He leaned in to kiss her goodnight, still marveling that this remarkable woman had agreed to be his wife. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Flynn barely saw Penny, who left early for the school with the children. He spent the morning preparing his quarters for their first night as husband and wife. The children would stay with Mrs. Larson, and the afternoon closing the store and dressing in his best suit. By 4:30, he stood nervously in the church vestibule with Samuel as his best man, the boy proudly wearing a new suit Flynn had ordered from Tucson. "Are you scared, Mr. MacAllister?" Samuel asked as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Flynn smiled at the boy who would soon be his stepson. "Not scared, Samuel, excited. Marrying your mother is the best decision I've ever made." Samuel nodded seriously. She cries sometimes, but not sad tears. She says they're happy tears. She never had those before we came here. Flynn swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. I promise you, Samuel, I'll do everything I can to make sure those are the only kind of tears she ever has again. The boy studied him for a moment, then held out his hand formally. Then I'm glad you're going to be our pa. Flynn shook the offered hand, then pulled Samuel into a quick hug. I'm glad too, son, very glad. The church filled quickly with what seemed like the entire population of Timber Creek. At precisely 5 o'clock, Reverend Thomas signaled for everyone to take their places. Flynn stood at the altar with Samuel beside him, Joseph standing proudly nearby. The small church had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbon. Mrs. Simmons began playing the piano, and the doors opened to reveal Martha in a pretty blue dress, scattering flower petals from a basket. Behind her came Abigail, concentrating fiercely on her important task of carrying a small cushion with 2 simple gold bands. And then Penny appeared, and Flynn forgot to breathe. She wore a dress of ivory satin that Mrs. Baker and her sewing circle must have worked day and night to create. Her copper hair was arranged with white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of desert blooms. But it was her radiant smile that struck Flynn to his core, a smile of pure joy and certainty. Sheriff Bailey escorted her down the aisle, having volunteered to give away the bride. When they reached the altar, he placed Penny's hand in Flynn's with a wink. Dearly beloved, Reverend Thomas began, but Flynn barely heard the familiar words. He was lost in Penny's eyes, in the miracle of finding a family when he least expected it. When the time came to speak his vows, Flynn's voice rang clear and true. I, Flynn James MacAllister, take you, Penelope Grace Winters, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be a father to your children, to provide for and protect all of you with everything I am. Where you go, I will go. Your family is my family, your joys my joys, your sorrows my sorrows. This is my solemn vow. Tears glistened in Penny's eyes as she repeated her own vows, her voice steady and sure. When they exchanged rings, simple bands Flynn had ordered from tucks in their hands were steady, their hearts certain. By the authority vested in me, Reverend Thomas concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Flynn, you may kiss your bride. Flynn gently lifted Penny's veil and kissed her to the cheers and applause of the entire town. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. MacAllister, Flynn felt a completeness he'd never known before. The reception at Mrs. Larson's home was a joyous affair. The entire town seemed determined to celebrate not just a wedding, but the healing of a family that had arrived broken and barefoot just 6 weeks earlier. There was dancing and laughter, cake and punch, and countless well wishes from people who had come to care deeply for the Winters family, now the MacAllisters. As evening turned to night, Flynn and Penny prepared to leave for their first night together in what would now be their family home above and behind the store. The children, excited to stay with Mrs. Larson and her famous sugar cookies, hugged their mother and new father goodnight. Be good for Mrs. Larson, Penny instructed, smoothing Abigail's hair. We will, Ma, Samuel promised, suddenly serious, and thank you for bringing us here for everything. Penny hugged her eldest son tightly. We're home now, Samuel, truly home. As Flynn and Penny walked back to the store through the quiet streets hand in hand, Penny suddenly stopped. Listen, she said, tilting her head. Flynn paused. What is it? Nothing, Penny smiled. No stagecoach dust, no fear, no uncertainty, just peace. Flynn drew her into his arms. And a future, don't forget that part. I won't, she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. How could I, when you've been reminding me of it since the day we arrived? They continued to their home, where Flynn had prepared a special surprise. He'd moved his quarters into a larger space behind the store, connecting it to the rooms above. What had been 2 separate living spaces was now one family home, with room for all of them. Oh, Flynn, Penny gasped as he showed her the changes. When did you do all this? I've been working on it evenings, he admitted, with help from some friends. Do you like it? It's perfect, she assured him, exploring the expanded living area, the new larger kitchen, the children's rooms thoughtfully arranged with their few possessions displayed lovingly. When they reached what was now their bedroom, Flynn hesitated. "I know this happened quickly," he began. "If you need time," Penny silenced him with a kiss. "I don't need time," she whispered against his lips. "I need you." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Penny's head resting on his chest, Flynn remembered the stagecoach that had brought her to Timber Creek. How different things might have been if he hadn't been standing outside his store that dusty afternoon, if he hadn't noticed her children's bare feet. "What are you thinking?" Penny murmured sleepily. "That I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory," Flynn replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "And that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive unexpectedly, on a dusty stagecoach with no shoes." Penny chuckled softly. "And sometimes a man who buys boots for barefoot children ends up with a ready-made family." "The best purchase I ever made," Flynn assured her, tightening his arms around her. "Worth every penny." "Speaking of pennies," she said, suddenly more alert. "What will we do when Herbert arrives?" Flynn considered this. "We'll face him together, as a family. You're my wife now, the children have a father to stand with their mother, the law is on our side." "I hope you're right," Penny sighed. "I couldn't bear to lose them or you now that we've found happiness." "Trust me," Flynn said, kissing her gently, "and trust the people of Timber Creek. We protect our own." 3 days later, as Penny was dismissing her students for the day, Flynn arrived at the schoolhouse with a grim expression. "He's here," he said simply when the last child had left. "Herbert Winters arrived on the afternoon stage. He's at the hotel now." Penny paled but remained composed. "The children, still at Mrs. Larson's for their after-school cookies," Flynn assured her. "Samuel knows not to bring them home until we come for them." "What do we do?" Penny asked, gathering her books with trembling hands. "We face him," Flynn said firmly. "On our terms, not his. I've already spoken to Sheriff Bailey and Judge Wilson. They're waiting for us at the courthouse." Penny nodded, drawing strength from her husband's confidence. "Then let's get this over with." They walked together to the small courthouse where local matters were settled. Inside, Sheriff Bailey and Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with kind eyes, waited with a third man Flynn didn't recognize, presumably a lawyer, and a fourth who could only be Herbert Winters. Herbert was a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and cold blue eyes that assessed Flynn dismissively before fixing on Penny with a mixture of triumph and disdain. "Penelope," he said, his voice cultured but hard, "you've led us on quite a chase." "Herbert," Penny acknowledged, her voice steadier than Flynn had expected. "This is my husband, Flynn MacAllister." Herbert's eyebrows rose. "Husband, how convenient, and how recent, I wonder." 3 days, Flynn replied evenly. "Though we've been courting since shortly after Mrs. Winters, now Mrs. MacAllister, arrived in Timber Creek." "A hasty marriage won't change anything," Herbert said dismissively. "I've come for my grandchildren. Their place is in Pennsylvania with their father's family, not in this frontier settlement with a shopkeeper stepfather." Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this matter civilly." Once they were seated around the judge's desk, Herbert's lawyer presented their case. Herbert Winters, as paternal grandfather and executor of Frederick Winters' estate, was seeking custody of the 4 children on grounds that their mother had fled Pennsylvania with them unlawfully, depriving them of their rightful inheritance and proper upbringing. When the lawyer finished, Judge Wilson turned to Penny. "Mrs. MacAllister, do you have legal representation?" Before Penny could answer, the door opened and a distinguished older man in an expensive suit entered. "Forgive my tardiness," he said. "Nathan Blackwood, attorney at law. I represent Mrs. MacAllister and her husband in this matter." Flynn looked at Penny in confusion. They hadn't hired an attorney. "Mr. Blackwood contacted me yesterday," Sheriff Bailey explained quietly. "He's from the territorial capital, sent by the governor himself after receiving inquiries about Mrs. MacAllister's inheritance." Nathan Blackwood wasted no time. He presented documentation showing that Penny had been in regular communication with the Pennsylvania courts regarding the inheritance, that she had established herself as a respected teacher in Timber Creek, and that she was now married to a prosperous business owner. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, I have affidavits from numerous citizens of Timber Creek attesting to Mrs. MacAllister's excellent care of her children and her standing in the community. Herbert Winters scoffed. Affidavits from frontier settlers. Hardly compelling evidence compared to the Winters family's century of respectability in Pennsylvania. Respectability, Flynn couldn't contain himself. Is it respectable to try to separate children from their mother, to pursue them across the country? Flynn, Penny warned softly, placing a hand on his arm. Judge Wilson looked at Herbert Winters. Mr. Winters, what precisely are your objections to the children remaining with their mother? Herbert straightened. Penelope is not from our social circle. She was a schoolteacher when my son unwisely married her. After his death, she made it clear she intended to return to teaching rather than devoting herself fully to his children. The Winters name carries responsibilities, expectations, so this is about social standing, the judge interrupted. Not the children's welfare. Their welfare is precisely my concern, Herbert insisted. They should be raised as Winters' heirs with all the advantages that entails. And what of their happiness? Penny asked quietly. Have you considered that, Herbert? Have you asked them what they want? Children don't know what they want, Herbert dismissed. They need guidance, structure, love, Flynn interjected. They need love, which their mother gives them in abundance. The judge considered for a moment. I believe we should hear from the children themselves. Despite Herbert's objections, Sheriff Bailey was dispatched to bring the children from Mrs. Larson's home. When they arrived, they entered cautiously, eyes widening at the sight of their grandfather. Children, Judge Wilson said kindly, please don't be afraid. We just need to ask you a few questions. One by one, the judge spoke with each child, asking simple questions about their life in Timber Creek, their feelings about their mother and new stepfather, and their memories of Pennsylvania. Samuel, as the oldest, spoke most eloquently. We're happy here, sir. Ma teaches school and Mr. MacAllister is teaching me about running the store. Martha helps with the little ones and Joseph's learning to read real good. Even Abigail has friends now. And what about your grandfather? The judge asked gently. Would you like to visit him in Pennsylvania? Samuel glanced at Herbert, then back at the judge. Grandfather was always very busy when our first pa was alive. He didn't visit much, and when he did, we had to be extra quiet and wear uncomfortable clothes. Herbert cleared his throat. Children need discipline, structure, children need love, Penny said firmly. Which you never gave them, Herbert. You barely knew their names before Frederick died, and suddenly you wanted to possess them like assets. This is outrageous, Herbert blustered. Judge, you demand nothing in my courtroom, Judge Wilson said sharply. I've heard enough. He looked at the children, then at Penny and Flynn, and finally at Herbert Winters. Mr. Winters, the law is clear on this matter, unless a mother is proven unfit, which Mrs. MacAllister clearly is not. She retains custody of her children. Their wishes, particularly those of the older children, are also considered. It's evident they are thriving here in Timber Creek. But the inheritance, Herbert protested. Frederick's estate will be properly administered according to law, Nathan Blackwood interjected. My firm has already been in contact with the Pennsylvania courts. The children's portion will be held in trust until they come of age, with Mrs. MacAllister as trustee. Your authority as executor extends only to distributing the assets, not determining custody. Herbert Winters' face flushed with anger. This isn't over, Penelope. The Pennsylvania courts have no jurisdiction here, Judge Wilson interrupted, and I'm issuing an order today confirming Mrs. MacAllister's custody of her children and recognizing her marriage to Mr. MacAllister. If you wish to contest it, you'll need to do so through the territorial courts, which I assure you will reach the same conclusion. Herbert looked from the judge to the sheriff, to the lawyer, and finally to Penny and Flynn standing united with the children gathered around them. Something in his expression changed a recognition, perhaps, that he had lost not just this battle but the war. Very well, he said stiffly. But I would request visitation rights. They are my son's children, after all. Penny exchanged a glance with Flynn, who nodded slightly. "We would not prevent the children from knowing their grandfather," she said carefully. "Supervised visits arranged in advance would be acceptable if the children wish it." Judge Wilson nodded approvingly. "A reasonable compromise. Now, I believe this matter is settled." Outside the courthouse, as Herbert Winters departed for his hotel, Nathan Blackwood shook hands with Flynn and Penny. "The governor sends his regards," he said cryptically. "He believes teachers and merchants are the backbone of the territory's future." After the lawyer left, Penny turned to Flynn in amazement. "How did the governor even know about our situation?" Flynn shrugged. "Timber Creek may be small, but we have friends in unexpected places. What matters is that it's over. Herbert has no legal ground to stand on now." Penny gathered her children close, her eyes shining with happy tears. "We're safe, truly safe. And together," Flynn added, completing their circle with his arms. "A family." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the children playing in the yard, Penny leaned against Flynn's shoulder. "I never imagined this," she confessed. "When we stepped off that stagecoach, I was terrified. No money, no shoes for the children, no certain place to go." "And now," Flynn prompted, kissing her temple. "Now we have everything that matters," Penny replied. "A home, security, love. The children are thriving. I'm teaching again, and I have you." Flynn smiled, remembering the day 6 weeks earlier when a dust-covered stagecoach had changed his life forever. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about expanding the store, maybe adding a proper book section since you've got the school running now. And the living quarters could use another room or two, especially if we decide to expand our family someday." Penny turned to him with a radiant smile. "I think that sounds wonderful." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Flynn MacAllister held his wife close, surrounded by the family he'd never expected to have. From a chance encounter with a shoeless family to a love that would last a lifetime, their journey had only just begun. And whatever the future held, they would face it together with strong boots and even stronger hearts.